De meest pijnlijke cave-ongelukken ooit. Caving is een soort sport dat mensen door grotten gaan kruipen die echt heel klein zijn en zo. Als je claustrofobie hebt, is dat je ergste nachtmerrie. Maar blijkbaar vinden sommige mensen dat een kick geven of zo. En sommigen gaan er heel erg pijnlijk aan dood. En deze video gaat daarover.
Mossdale Cave Incident. It was June 24th, 1967, and 10 cavers were about to enter Mossdale Cavern to help clear some of the deeper passages and map them out.
1967. Toen deden mensen al dit soort dingen. Ja, kijk, dat je het toen deed, snap ik nog wel erg. Toen had je ook nog geen PlayStation of andere dingen. Waarom in godsnaam zou je nu, vandaag de dag, nog jezelf proberen door zo'n gat heen te wurmen? En als je vast zit, dan kom je er nooit meer uit. Dan ga je langzaam een pijnlijke dood tegemoet. Denk even na, man. Je kan ook gewoon FIFA spelen of zo.
The two leaders of the group had already explored this cave before, which reassured everyone else. This particular cavern was known for its tight spaces and the very few areas where a person could fully stand. After a few hours inside, 4 of the cavers realized how difficult the cave actually was and decided to return to the surface.
Kijk. Dat is top. Je denkt van, wow, weet je, het wordt wel heel krap. Wat in godsnaam heb ik eraan als ik het tot het einde van deze grot haal? Helemaal niks. Laat ik misschien maar teruggaan voordat ik dood ga.
They noticed a cloudy sky, but nothing seemed out of the ordinary. The remaining cavers continued their descent until they reached the Far Marathon Passage, which
The Far Marathon Passage. Hoe komen ze ook op die namen altijd?
measured only 18 inches by 12 inches, with a small stream of water flowing along the bottom.
Oh gosh, er loopt water. 45 bij 30 centimeter. 30 centimeter. Zoiets. 45 centimeter, dat is zoiets. Kijk, even voor een beeld te krijgen. Kijk, dit soort shit krijg je dan. Dit soort gekke shit, gozer. Dit is niet te doen. Waarom zou je dit willen? Waarom zou je dit willen? Dit is toch geen sport? Sorry, we gaan verder.
Everything seemed to be going well, and the group on the surface soon noticed that it had started raining, so they took cover. Initially, the rain
Ik weet al wat er gaat gebeuren.
Did not seem concerning, but the cavers inside began to notice rising water levels. When the water became alarmingly high, they decided to end the day's work and head back.
Oké, pas toen het echt heel hoog werd, gingen ze pas terug. Niet toen er gewoon water naar binnen kwam. Ze dachten van, okay, nu kan ik bijna niet meer ademen. Misschien moeten we nu maar teruggaan.
Even though they were still 3 hours from the entrance.
3 uur. 3 uur lang kruipen.
Meanwhile, the surface group spotted something terrifying. A lake of water had formed around the cave's entrance. The cavers inside had no idea how much water was about to flood the cave. The surface group ran to get help, while the cavers frantically tried to reach higher chambers. However, the water continued to rise, pressing toward their faces. Rescuers and hundreds of volunteers worked tirelessly, pumping water out of the cave and pumping oxygen inside.
Oxygen inside? Oké. Ja, gast. Dit is natuurlijk niet te doen.
Hoping that the cavers had found a safe chamber. Unfortunately, every one of the cavers drowned.
Wat droog dit. Oké, ja, helaas. Ja, jongens, onder water kan je niet ademen. En adem is handig om te doen als je wil blijven leven. Noted.
Sinkhole tragedy. It was May 28th, 1973, and a group of...
Ook al zo lang geleden. Iets minder lang geleden. Ja, oké, fair enough. Nog steeds niks te doen in die tijd. Begrijp het.
9 diving experts had planned a dive at Mount Gambier's shaft.
Oh, dit is een cave diving ongeluk. Dat is nog leuker. Dan heb je niet alleen zo'n grot, maar ook nog eentje die onder water is. Dus dan kan je letterlijk die ademen. Maar goed. Deze kunnen dus niet doodgaan doordat hij vol loopt met water, want hij is al vol met water. Dus ik ben benieuwd wat er nu gebeurt.
This sinkhole had a unique feature. There was only a tiny opening leading to a cave with a lake 20 feet below. From this opening, a beam of light went down into the cave and onto the lake, which was extremely helpful for the diver's orientation. This beam was visible throughout most of the cave, unless...
Kijk, inderdaad, licht. Altijd super chill om te hebben.
Divers ventured too deep into one of the 2 side branches. Everyone initially agreed that they would stay within a 200-foot maximum depth range, so they could remain in the main chamber and still see the guiding light. This was their only plan.
Kijk, dit is hun enige plan. Je blijft bij het licht. Je gaat niet naar het enge, diepe, duistere, donkere gedeelte. Ze blijven absoluut bij hun plan, natuurlijk. Ze gaan niet afwijken van hun plan. Want dat zou dom zijn.
The second day, however, 4 divers planned to go to the western section of the cave, aiming for a depth of 250 feet, which
ze wijken af van het plan.
Would have been a new record. This was deeper than initially intended and posed a significant risk because...
Maar new record, stel ze hadden dat gedaan. Who cares? Alsof ze het nieuws hadden gehaald met het feit dat zij 76 meter een grot in hadden gedoken. No one cares.
Because in 1973...
Het is niet waard, dat is wat ik probeer te zeggen.
Divers were still using regular air cylinders rather than mixed gas tanks.
Oké, wacht even, wat is het verschil? Oké, nou, ik begrijp niet helemaal wat het verschil is tussen mixed gas en regular air cylinders, maar oké.
Be more cautious as they went downwards, because nitrogen narcosis might have settled in. As they went down...
Als je te diep gaat met zo'n tank, dan komt er dus te veel druk van buitenaf. En dan verandert het in te veel stikstof. En dan word je helemaal een soort van high. Alsof je onder narcose gaat. Dat is wat er gebeurt dan. Dat wist ik toevallig. Ik heb het niet net opgezocht of zo.
The increasing pressure would have pushed the nitrogen into the bloodstream, producing a state of consciousness that is
Hij ging het ook gewoon uitleggen daarna.
more accustomed to standard open water scuba diving. This added even more risk to their plan. They started going downwards into the western section of the cave, and one experienced diver noticed that nitrogen narcosis was kicking in, so he immediately went back out.
Oh. Maar hij dacht niet, ik zeg even tegen die andere guys van, misschien moeten jullie ook maar terug. Huh?
Several of them followed him and went back to the surface as well.
Oh. Kijk, wat slim. Maar waarom volgt de rest dan niet? Hebben ze gewoon scheid of hadden ze het niet tegen hun verteld?
But 4 of them kept going.
Oh mijn god, alle 4.
Determined to set the record and get a quick look before resurfacing. After a minute or so, the group at the surface became concerned, realizing the 4 divers would soon exhaust their air supply. A few returned to the cave to find them, and they discovered a flashlight and a camera on the bottom, but no trace of the divers.
Oh mijn god, ze hebben nog een fotoshoot gehouden ook.
There was a problem that we haven't yet mentioned, silt. The movements of the 4 divers stirred up the long-settled silt into a sand cloud that would take a lot of time to settle back. This reduced visibility to less than an arm's length, removing any hope for orientation for the underwater divers. Without being able to see anything, oxygen running dangerously low, and nitrogen narcosis kicking in.
Maar als het maar 1 tunnel is, dan weet je gewoon, ik moet die kant op. Ik ga gewoon daarin tot ik tegen een muur aankom, toch? In principe, zou je zeggen.
4 divers drowned.
Ja, die P. Wat droog dit gozer. Jacob's
It's
Well.
November 23rd, 1983.
Het wordt steeds later. Nu is het 1983.
2 students from Texas State University, named Richard and Clark, are about to enter Jacob's Well, an
Jacob's
underwater...
Well, ik ken dit. Het ziet er heel grappig uit aan de buitenkant. Ja, check. Fucking lijp. Gewoon zo'n gat in de grond. Kan ook van afspringen en zo. Je kan er dus in zwemmen, maar het is dus echt een heel klein plasje, maar het is fucking diep. Kijk, dit is er gewoon omheen gemaakt zo. Hier kan je in zwemmen. Heel erg diep.
hole that leads to an underwater cave. This hole seems relatively shallow, around 25 feet, and many people try to touch the bottom and then come up. However, this is just a deceiving appearance because it actually leads to another underwater cave with 3 chambers. The first 2 are relatively open and easy to get through, but the third one has a really small squeeze to get into it. If you manage to squeeze through, you'll enter a room that is 10 feet tall, and you'll see a really small hole at the farthest edge, too small to pass through. This small tunnel was just 2 feet in diameter, and 2 years prior, 2 people died in it because after they managed to get through, a rock slide filled with gravel blocked them inside. Now, getting back to our 2 students...
Er zijn al 2 mensen doodgegaan omdat ze iets te ver gingen. Oké, chill.
They were fairly experienced in normal diving, but not in cave diving, and they were trying to get their instructor certification in open water diving. Their instructor, Don, was an incredibly skilled and experienced diver, and he was the one who removed the 2 bodies we just talked about. He used to...
Oh gosh. Ja, iemand moet die lichamen natuurlijk ook weer ophalen met gevaar voor eigen leven. Ja. A legend.
Constantly warn everybody to stay away from Jacob's Well since it's deadly, and he even tried to cover up the small hole that leads to the 4th chamber with some cement. But other divers reopened it and left a message that said, "You can't keep us out."
Ja, dag. Wat een losers, man.
Almost died in Jacob's Well. When he tried to enter the 4th chamber, a gravel slide trapped him in the tunnel. He almost resigned himself to death. His tank was empty, and he had swallowed some water when his survival instinct kicked in, and he started rapidly moving until he cleared enough gravel to escape. When he did, he saw his diving colleague extending a regulator for him to breathe. As he started resurfacing, the air inside his body expanded until he reached almost 4 times his normal body size.
Is dat mogelijk? 4 keer je normale lichaam? Dus dan zou ik gewoon letterlijk... Dat kan helemaal niet. Dan zou ik letterlijk zo groot zijn. What the fuck?
By the time he broke the surface, he was screaming in pain. His belly was huge because his stomach had completely ruptured. These stories caught the attention of Richard and Clark, who wanted to take a look for themselves, even though they didn't really know much about cave diving.
Richard en Clark, jullie zijn gestoord. Een gozer zijn maag scheurt en jullie denken van... Sounds nice. Ja, sorry, dan gaat er al iets helemaal mis. Dan gaat er echt iets helemaal mis. Doe normaal.
On November 23rd, 1983, they went into Jacob's Well and reached the 3rd chamber, where the small hole was located. Richard removed his tank to get through the hole and started going in while holding his tank.
Oh mijn god, die moet je tank afdoen en hem vasthouden, omdat je anders niet past. Dat is echt lijp.
Clark removed his own oxygen tank and tried to get in. He saw Richard's face and noticed Richard didn't have the tank with him anymore and was suffocating. Clark...
What the fuck?
quickly reached for the regulator and gave it to him, letting him breathe again. They started passing the regulator back and forth as they made their way out, and somehow they managed to get through the tight squeeze of the third chamber. They then began making their way toward the exit until a terrifying sound caught their attention.
Oh mijn god, ze zijn verkeerd gezwommen.
Oxygen tank. Not only did this mean they'd hit a wall with the tank, so they were going the wrong direction, but it also meant the tank was almost empty. They realized they'd run into the false chimney in the first chamber, a tunnel that looks like it leads to the surface, but is actually a dead end.
Oh mijn god. Jongens toch, jongens toch.
Clark managed to swim back to the surface and gasped for air after covering an incredible 75 feet in a single breath. Unfortunately, the same can't be said for Richard, who remained behind and drowned. When Clark called the police for assistance, Don the instructor himself showed up and was stunned to see his students there. Gollum's Cave.
Alweer Don die iemand moet redden uit het water. Tenminste, redden. Iemand moet bergen uit het water. Oké, de laatste.
It's August 18th, 2005, and a group...
2005. Nog steeds mensen die dit doen. Je kan ook gewoon FIFA spelen. That's what I said. Remember that, guys.
A group of 5 friends decided to venture into the Gollum Cave, also called the Cave of Death, because
ja. Moet ik nog iets toevoegen?
of how dangerous it was. They reached the entrance at 3 a.m., and one of the friends decided to wait for the others outside.
Fucking slimme legend. 3 a.m.? Dat is 3 uur 's nachts. Waarom zijn ze er dan?
They encountered their first problem when actually
Waarom zou je dit om 3 uur 's nachts doen? Wat is de toegevoegde waarde daarvan?
trying to get in, as they had to crawl through a small pool of water. After that, there was a fork going left and right, and they chose left, which led them to another small pool of water. This seemingly innocent pool, however, actually led to another section of the cave through an underwater tunnel. The tunnel itself was really small, just 3 to 4 feet in diameter, and to get through it, you had to be completely submerged. This meant only
Nee joh, doen ze dat ook nog?
one person at a time could go in, and they had to swim about 15 feet.
What the fuck? Hoe kom je daar ook? Hoe ontdek je ook dat dit kan? Waarom zou je daar zo in zwemmen? What the hell?
One by one, they started plunging into the pool of water to reach the other side of the cave, and once they made it, they discovered a section with about 3 feet of airspace. From the perspective of the friend who stayed outside, there was no sound or light coming from inside the cave, and after a while he started to get worried. He went into the cave himself, but heard no noises and saw no...
Oh mijn god, hij gaat er nog achteraan ook, hè. Hij wilde eigenlijk niet, en nu moet hij ze gaan redden of kijken waar ze zijn, en straks gaat hij er zelf nog dood.
lights. Not sure what to do, he first called some friends
Oh, heel goed, heel goed.
who had experience with caving, and then called the police. He couldn't have imagined what was happening inside. The 4 friends who went in probably realized that the 3 feet of airspace they'd reached had bad air, which is a term cavers use for air that doesn't have the normal balance of gases, meaning there's more carbon dioxide and less oxygen.
Oké, dus dan stik je gewoon eigenlijk.
This reduces your ability to think, move, and breathe properly, making the return swim through that narrow tunnel super risky. They tried to get back out one at a time, but the first person who went underwater was unable to find the exit hole before running out of breath. That happened because the increased carbon dioxide messed with her ability to hold her breath and think clearly.
Als we gaan checken.
After 30 to 60 seconds, the second person went in and found the first one, and so on, until all of them got stuck in the
Oh mijn god, ze konden er gewoon niet meer langs, want die eerste dood ging.
tunnel. The police arrived and tried to pump in oxygen and pump out water, while family and friends waited anxiously outside the cave. Unfortunately, it was all in vain. The bodies were later recovered, and the cave was eventually closed off with cement.
We hebben een goed idee om die grotten af te sluiten waar iedereen in dood gaat. Jongens, nogmaals, ik zeg, ga lekker FIFA spelen. Stop met dat caven. Het slaat nergens op. En ga dood. Bedankt voor het kijken, jongens. Ik zie jullie later. Abonneer even.